Hi everyone, how's it going? On this video, we'll be talking about some tips, guides, and a bit of explanation of the stuff I've discovered during the previous beta test for the first Descendant. I would also like to put this as a disclaimer first. Whatever data I've gathered from the crossplay open beta and the final technical tests will most likely be subjected to a slight change for the official release on July 2. So with that being said, let's move on to the video. First up, selecting your first character. At the start of the game, you will be given 3 characters to choose from. From left to right, we've got Viessa, Lepic, and Ajax. Let's talk about Viessa first. Viessa's main role is a debuffer. Her abilities allow you to slow down or freeze enemies in place, which is very useful in team fights or solo gameplay. Her abilities allow you to defend objectives and keep enemies off your back when facing a horde of enemies. And you can also use her to slow the enemies down to deal more consistent DPS using her weapons or her other abilities. There are a few more pros to using Viessa, like her movement speed buff that also increases her defense and leaves an ice trail that imposes the ice shackle effect on the enemies that touch it. And she has a somewhat decent damage potential with her abilities. There's not much cons to using her, other than the slightly lower damage output compared to Lepic, and the constant need to be on the move like Bunny just to make the most out of her second ability, Frostroad, to maximize the area where enemies can come into contact with her debuff. Overall, she requires an active playstyle, which some people might prefer, or if not, that might be a con for you. Moving on, next we have Lepic. Lepic's main role is an AoE damage dealer. His abilities are tailored for clearing multiple enemies and grouping them up for an easy finish. His second ability in particular is quite useful for increasing his skill power modifier and adding the burn effect to enemies hit by both the grenade and overkill abilities. The pros to using Lepic are his high damage output, crowd control ability, skill damage increase buff, the multiple sources of DOTs or damage over time in his kit, and he's also really good at clearing out large hordes of enemies during the uptime of his overkill ability. There are a few cons to using Lepic, which are the high cooldown timers for his abilities, the high MP costs, the long animation time for activating his fourth ability, and 3 of his abilities are slow moving projectiles, and a slight lack of a good base defense stat. That being said, Lepic has his passive ability called Close Call, which lets you shrug off fatal damage once, with a cooldown of 5 minutes during battle. And with that, let's move on to the last starting character, Ajax. Ajax's main role is as a tank dealer, which means he can both soak up damage and dish it out at the same time. Ajax can boost certain stats like shield amount or reflect damage proportional to his defense when the abilities are in their enhanced state. For example, knocking back enemies will increase max shields, or blocking enemy fire with his barriers will reflect damage on hit. The pros to using Ajax is his ability to keep himself in the fight long enough for your allies to thin out the herd, or for you to eventually kill them all with your weapons. He's got a decent AoE range, you can stun enemies and shorten the distance, at the same time, knock back foes when they're at close range, and reliably defend objectives and your allies by using your barriers. The cons to using Ajax is that there's a lack of damage boosting buff in his kit, relying on getting hit by enemies to charge Event Horizon, which is dangerous if there's a hard hitting enemy, just to charge his Void Energy meter. There's no reliable way of pulling aggro for a large group of enemies, and the heavy reliance to weapons for a continuous source of DPS, which becomes a negative when there are no ammo supply drops or when fighting a bullet sponge enemy like a Colossus. Your choice of characters will significantly impact your gameplay experience, mostly during solo gameplay. There are always open lobbies that you can join into, so pick the character you think you'll enjoy or like the most, since getting a different character requires you to unlock a certain part or portion of the game to be able to farm for them. Well, there's always an option to just buy them from the market. So, you do you. This next set of tips will be all about mastery rank, And since there's quite a bit of information to go through, I will try my best to compress the information as much as possible. Firstly, Mastery Rank is the collection of points given to your account to increase its level, and it's gained through leveling up equipment, characters, and completing mission or mission quests. Mastery Rank experience can only be gained once per weapon, character, and mission node. For weapons, the weapon level is completely separate from the mastery level. You can only gain weapon level by transmuting a higher level weapon into the one you're currently using. And mastery can only be gained by obtaining experience through kills on your weapons and also by shared experience from your squad mates. For characters or descendants, however, descendant and mastery levels are simultaneously gained and at an equivalent rate through getting kills from abilities, weapons, and shared squad experience. The only difference is when using a crystallization catalyst, which resets your character's levels to gain a slot polarity. It does not include a reset to your mastery level. For missions, mastery experience can only be gained through completing the mission for the first time. Doing the same mission over and over again will not give you any extra mastery experience points. In many ways, mastery rank is significant to your gameplay experience since it increases your inventory capacity, storage capacity, module capacity, and your maximum module level. Therefore, it is advisable to increase your mastery rank whenever it is available. Next up, here are some tips or guides for inventory management. Why am I doing this? Well, it's because I've messed up multiple times and I don't want you to experience the same thing. First up, always keep one copy of the weapon you get as a loot in your inventory. For common rarity weapons, this will be fairly easy since there's no substats to min-max for. This advice is pretty useful for cases where you want to increase your mastery levels and you don't want to farm for new weapons. It is also a good idea to keep a few weapons with the highest levels in your inventory or storage box, since it can be used to transmute its levels to a new weapon with a better substats. Also, especially if it's the one that you're currently using and you've already put an activator on it. Always dismantle weapons and accessories you do not want or need instead of selling them to a vendor. Dismantling weapons gives you the resources for weapon transmutation and weapons crafting. Dismantling accessories gives you the resources to craft enhancement materials for your reactors, and trust me, sooner or later you're going to need all the resources you can get since you'll need different reactors or reactor types for each descendant. Pressing Shift opens up a separate tooltip window which lets you compare the weapons or accessories you have equipped with the ones you're hovering your mouse on. Pressing and holding Shift lets you select all weapons and accessories in your inventory and designate them as junk items. This is useful for quickly dismantling or if you want to sell your surplus items fairly quickly. On that note, if there's a particular weapon, reactor, or sub-accessories that you want to keep, and you don't want to accidentally sell them or dismantle them, you can hover your mouse cursor over to that specific equipment and it will show you which hotkey to press to register it as a favorite, meaning it'll exclude that item from the designate all as junk action. In the case of the final technical test, it was you on the keyboard, but bear in mind this may change during the official launch. Next up, before going into a mission or a dungeon, always make sure that you have enough inventory slots for new loot. If the important weapons and accessories that you have are taking a significant amount of space in your inventory, you can always transfer them to your storage box in Albion. The amount of times I've lost good loot since I didn't have enough space in my inventory is too many and too painful to recount. And now, let's briefly or not so briefly talk about modules. The modules are stored separately from weapons and accessories, and modules don't need inventory slots, so you can hoard them as much as you want. I will not go through the classifications of modules and their different properties in this guide, but I will share some tips as to how to manage them and what to do with your extra copies. Modules can be dismantled to acquire resources needed for module upgrades. Dismantling modules requires you to go to a specific NPC named Cillian in Albion where you can enhance, dismantle, or combine your modules. You can also quickly dismantle all spare copies of your modules by pressing and holding Shift on your keyboard, or you can manually select the modules you want to dismantle by pressing left click. Do take into account that using Select Duplicate Modules action will only leave one copy for each module type in your storage. So if a separate copy of a module you have is enhanced and it is not equipped in any weapon or Descendant, it will also be included in the Select Duplicate Modules action. But worry not, if you happen to dismantle it by accident, all the resources used in the enhancement of that module you just dismantled will all be refunded. Unless of course the devs change this for the official launch. So it might be best to move with caution when using this shortcut. Since we're in the topic of modules, there are currently 3 ways of increasing the quality or quantity of modules you can equip on your weapons or your Descendants. The first option is to consistently increase your mastery rank, which, as I've stated earlier, increases your module capacity, and it also gives you an additional module slot depending on the mastery rank milestone you reach. The second option is to use a crystallization catalyst, which is a one-time use item, on your Descendants or weapons. Take note, this action is only possible if your Descendant or weapon is at the maximum level or mastery. If you equip the module on a slot with the same symbol or polarity, the module drain will be decreased by half. And the third option is to use an activator. An activator can be used for both your weapons and Descendants, but take note that it is also a one-time use item like the crystallization catalyst. That being said, the good news is you can farm for the ingredients for it and then craft it. And for all you whales out there, yes, you can also buy them from the market. Do keep in mind that you can only install it once per weapon or Descendant, meaning you can only double your module capacity once. And if you're wondering how it works on weapons, even if it's the same weapon and weapon type and all that, you will have to install a new activator if you want to switch to your new one. So, make sure you like the weapon's substats before installing an activator on it. Well, for now folks, that will be all for this guide. I would love to discuss the numbers and efficiency for the weapons and Descendants on this video, but sadly I don't have the data and information required for that. And also it will be more accurate if I just wait for the official launch. For now my friends, have a wonderful day. Please like, share, and subscribe for more gaming content and news. Also, comment down below what you think about this video. This is Nijimax signing off.